It was just past noon when the bell above the cafe door gave its familiar chime, a soft metallic jingle that had over time become background music to June Whittaker's everyday life. The Rusty Spoon Cafe wasn't much, a squat brick building with faded teal awnings and a crooked sign that looked like it had weathered 3 generations of Montana winters. But it was hers, not in ownership, of course. June was just a waitress here, but it was the place where she spent most of her hours, most of her energy, and most days, most of her spirit. She stood behind the counter in her usual faded blue apron, wiping down a stack of chipped coffee mugs with a checkered cloth. Her sneakers were scuffed, her ponytail was beginning to sag, and her bones, though she was only 26, felt far older than they should. The bell chimed again. June didn't look up at first. Probably Sam Mitchell back for his second slice of peach pie, or maybe the Harper twins from the local hardware store, always trying to flirt their way into an extra refill. But when she finally lifted her gaze, she paused. A man stood there, tall, early 30s maybe, sharp navy overcoat draped across broad shoulders. His black dress shoes gleamed against the worn wooden floor, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not a forgotten town like Silver Hill. And yet, here he was, blinking against the sudden change in lighting, eyes scanning the room like someone who had stumbled into the wrong story. He walked in slowly and chose the booth by the window, the one with the cracked red leather seat and the best view of Main Street. June smoothed her apron and approached him with her usual, practiced smile. "Welcome to the Rusty Spoon," she said warmly. "Coffee to start?" The man looked up at her. His eyes were a soft hazel, not striking but steady, familiar in a strange, impossible way. "Yes, please," he replied. "Black." She nodded and turned, curiosity flickering beneath her calm demeanor. Out-of-towners were rare this time of year, and definitely not dressed like that. Evan Calloway hadn't meant to stop. He was en route to Bozeman for a quarterly leadership summit, a stop he made reluctantly every few months just to maintain appearances. He was the kind of man who had meetings in airports and dinners in hotel lounges, where the napkins were folded into origami shapes, and the silence came with a side of exhaustion. But somewhere along the highway, his GPS glitched, a detour, a wrong turn, and then the low fuel light blinked on, and he'd found himself in Silver Hill, Montana, a name that sounded like a postcard but looked more like a memory. When he pulled into town, his stomach growled audibly. He couldn't remember the last proper meal he'd had, and the little cafe on the corner, with its peeling paint and glowing "open" sign, called to him in a way that was oddly comforting. As he sipped the coffee she'd placed in front of him moments later, strong, bitter, real, he found his shoulders relaxing in a way they hadn't in weeks. He looked around at the mismatched chairs, the old jukebox in the corner playing something soft and nostalgic, the handwritten pie menu taped above the counter. It was imperfect, lived in. It was peaceful. June came back with her notepad. "We've got meatloaf or chicken pot pie today," she said. "Both made fresh this morning." He hesitated for a moment. "Pot pie sounds safe." She smiled. "It's more than safe, it's legendary." He chuckled, and something about the sound made her pause for a half-second longer than she meant to. "Coming right up," she said, and walked off, wondering what someone like him was doing in a place like this. 15 minutes later, he was halfway through his pot pie when his fingers patted his coat pocket. Once, then twice, and his brows knit together. He checked under the table. Briefcase, empty side pocket, inner jacket lining, no wallet. He cursed under his breath. June returned with a coffee refill, and before she could pour, he looked up, slightly embarrassed. "I think I left my wallet," he said. She blinked. "You sure?" "I had it this morning, I swear. I can come back tomorrow, or give you my business card." June looked at him for a long second. Most waitresses would have asked him to leave something behind. A watch, a phone, some guarantee he'd come back, but something in his face, something tired and honest, made her shake her head. "It's okay," she said softly. "Happens more often than you think." He blinked, surprised. "You're just letting it go?" She grinned. "You don't seem like the kind of guy who runs out on a lunch bill." He let out a breath, a real one, the kind that comes after holding your breath too long. "I'll make it up to you," he said, a little quieter. She shrugged. Sometimes people just need a little kindness. They exchanged names, hers, June Whitaker, his, Evan. They shook hands. His were warm, hers slightly calloused from endless dishes and cold mornings. For a moment, it felt like time slowed just enough for them to notice the stillness. "Drive safe," she told him as he left. He looked back once, eyes lingering on her for a second longer than necessary. Back in the kitchen, June wiped down the counter and exhaled. She didn't know what had made her pay for his meal. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, not through her like so many did, but at her, like she was real, like she mattered. She didn't expect to see him again. She certainly didn't expect that a small act of kindness would become the beginning of something that would change her life. But in a town like Silver Hill, the kind of place people forgot about, kindness had a way of echoing longer than expected, and sometimes it came back around when you least expected it. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky still hung heavy with clouds, a soft gray stretching endlessly over Silver Hill. June was already on her feet before the alarm buzzed. She tiptoed past her mother's room and quietly slipped into the kitchen, where the smell of damp earth floated through the cracked open window. There wasn't much in the fridge, there never was, but she scrambled some eggs, made toast, and brewed just enough coffee for her and Harper. Her sister had pulled a late night again, tutoring kids over Zoom, her way of helping out without making June feel like she was failing. June placed the coffee beside Harper's usual spot and grabbed her worn denim jacket off the back of the chair. She paused at the doorway and looked back once, just once, then shut the door behind her. At the Rusty Spoon, the small town hum was starting to buzz. Locals filtered in for their morning rituals. Old Sheriff Bailey, who never said much unless it was about trout fishing, Mrs. Leary, who always asked for extra syrup but never touched it, and the teenage couple from the high school, eyes full of naive forever. June moved between tables with ease. She had a rhythm: smile, pour, check in, disappear, repeat. But around 10:30, as the breakfast crowd thinned out, she saw him again, the man from yesterday, same black coat, same quiet presence. He stepped in like he'd done it 100 times, though he clearly hadn't. His eyes swept the room once, then landed on the same table by the window. Without a word he sat. June's breath caught just for a second. She wiped her hands on her apron and approached, keeping her voice light. "Well," she said, "you found your way back." He looked up at her, and his smile was quieter today. Not distant, just measured. "I figured I owed you breakfast," he said, tapping the menu, "or at least a proper thank you." "You don't owe me anything," June replied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "It was just a meal. People forget wallets all the time." "Still," he said, eyes never leaving hers, "not everyone would have covered it." There was a pause, comfortable oddly. "What'll it be?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Whatever you'd recommend for someone who had a rough week." She smirked. "French toast, extra cinnamon, comfort food. Then I trust your judgment." She scribbled the order and turned to leave, but he spoke again, softer this time. "June, right?" She froze, looked over her shoulder. "Name tag," he said gently, nodding toward her chest. "Right, the name tag." She offered a quick smile and returned to the kitchen. Back behind the counter, she could feel his eyes on her, not in a leering way, not even in a curious way, just aware, present, like he noticed things other people didn't. She didn't know why it rattled her. When she brought his plate out, he closed his book and sat upright, the way someone did when they were about to say something important but weren't sure they should. "You live here long?" he asked. All my life, she replied, setting the plate down. Why? He shrugged. Small towns are interesting. People remember you even when you think they've forgotten. She blinked. That line, it hit something buried. I guess that's true, she said, but her voice was quieter now. He didn't press. Instead, he ate, slowly, like he had nowhere to be, and when she checked on him again, he asked her something unexpected. Do you ever want to leave? The question hung in the air. June stared at him for a second, the sounds of the cafe fading around her. Only the soft clink of forks and quiet murmurs remained. Sometimes, she answered honestly, but I've got my mom, my sister, this job, so I stay. He nodded, not judgmental, just listening. I used to think staying meant I'd failed, he said, after a while. Now I'm not so sure. There was something about the way he said it, like he knew what it felt like to carry things people didn't see, maybe more than she did. By the time he left, he had paid double. No wallet issues this time, and as he reached the door, he looked back and said, Thank you, June, for more than just the toast. She watched him disappear down the street, that black coat fluttering in the breeze like something from a memory. That night, Harper asked, So, who was he? June looked up from the sink, the last few dishes clinking under the faucet. Just a guy passing through, I guess. Harper raised an eyebrow. You guess? I don't know, June admitted. There's something about him, like he's carrying something heavy, but he doesn't show it. Not really. Harper sipped her tea and didn't say more. But before bed, June caught herself standing by the window, staring into the night, wondering if he'd come back again. And what he might be hiding, he didn't come back the next day. Or the day after that. June told herself it didn't matter. She barely knew him, just a stranger who forgot his wallet, showed up again, and talked like he understood quiet pain. But on the third day, when the lunch rush passed, and the corner table by the window stayed empty, she felt it, that emptiness, the silence of someone's absence. Which is strange, she thought, because how could you miss someone you barely met? By Thursday, she had almost convinced herself he was gone for good. But then, just as the rain returned, soft and steady, he stepped through the door. Same coat, a little more worn now, or maybe she was just noticing the details more. He walked to the window seat again, sat, waited. June approached slowly, pretending not to care, but her voice gave her away. You found your way back, she said, softer than she meant to. He looked up, and this time he smiled like it was the only thing he'd been waiting to see. I said I'd come back, he answered. She folded her arms. You didn't exactly make a reservation. I didn't want to assume, he said. Some people don't like being found. That caught her. She sat down across from him without thinking. Are you one of those people? She asked. He tilted his head. Used to be. June watched him, really watched him this time. His hands were rough, calloused in places that told stories without needing words. His eyes were the kind that scanned rooms fast but always landed with purpose. He wasn't some wanderer. He was someone who'd built walls high enough to make them look like homes. What are you running from? She asked suddenly, surprising even herself. He blinked, once, then looked out the window. Not running, he said, just unrooted. Sounds lonely. He smiled again. Sometimes it is. She didn't push after that. Instead, she stood and took his order. Black coffee, no sugar this time, and left him to the quiet. But the rest of the day, her mind kept circling back, unrooted. That was a word she understood better than she wanted to admit. After closing, June found herself lingering. She should have gone home. Her mother needed her. Harper probably had dinner waiting, but she stayed behind, wiping a spotless counter. He came back in, not with the usual steps, slower this time, almost hesitant. I forgot something, he said. She turned. What? He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded napkin. I owe you this. She unfolded it. It was a sketch. Her, at the window, hair tucked back, a soft smile on her face that it wasn't perfect, but it felt like her, the way people rarely saw her. You drew this? He nodded. Helps me remember moments that don't look like much to others. June stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "What's your name?" He hesitated, just a second, like it hurt to say. "Evan." "Evan," she repeated. "Nice to finally meet you." "Likewise, June." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the hum of the broken neon light, the ticking of the wall clock, and the soft whistle of wind outside. Then she asked the one question she wasn't sure she wanted the answer to. "Are you staying in Silver Hill?" His reply was quiet. "I don't know yet." That night, June lay awake in bed. The napkin sketch sat on her nightstand. Her fingers traced it over and over, like maybe by touching it, she'd understand why this stranger, this Evan, had gotten under her skin. And in the silence of her room, she realized something she hadn't let herself feel in years. She wanted him to stay. The days that followed were quiet, but not in the usual way. Evan became part of the rhythm, not loud, not demanding, just present. He'd come in around the same time, order the same black coffee, sometimes a slice of peach pie, and sit at the window seat, never asking for more than what she offered. And June found herself looking forward to the sound of the bell above the door. One afternoon he brought her a book. It was worn, the spine cracked, a second-hand store sticker still barely hanging on. "You said you liked poetry," he said. She blinked, confused. "I don't remember telling you that." "You didn't," Evan replied. "But I saw the way your fingers paused on the frost quote painted on the back wall." She held the book for a long time before whispering, "You pay too much attention." He chuckled. "It's a habit I can't shake." But Evan didn't just watch. He listened. When Harper came in late one evening with 2 takeout containers and a tired smile, he stood up and offered his chair. When Mrs. Lindell, the older woman with the cane, dropped her purse by the register, Evan was already there, gently helping her gather the contents without judgment. He blended in, but people noticed. June noticed. And yet, for all his kindness, there was something held back, like he was always ready to leave. One rainy night, as thunder rolled in the distance, June asked the question she'd kept buried for too long. "What do you do, Evan, for work?" He looked up from his coffee. "I used to work in development, tech companies mostly, startups." "You used to?" He hesitated. "I walked away a year ago." "Why?" His answer was simple, but it changed everything. "My mother passed, suddenly. I missed the call because I was in a meeting about user metrics." The silence that followed was thick. "I sold everything," he continued. "Moved out of the city, didn't tell anyone. I've just been driving since." June swallowed. "You came here on purpose?" He nodded. "Not at first. My car broke down just outside of town, but when I walked in that day..." He stopped. "What?" she asked. He met her eyes, steady this time. "You looked like someone who'd understand what silence feels like when the world moves on without you." It was too much, too soon, too close. June stood up abruptly. "I need to close early tonight," she said. He didn't argue, just nodded. But as he left, he placed the sketchbook on the table. "Page 14, he said. "If you ever want to see." Then he walked out into the rain. She didn't open it at first, but curiosity is its own kind of ache. When she finally did, her breath caught. Page 14 wasn't a drawing of her, or the cafe, or the town. It was a cemetery, a small grave with an old wooden bench nearby, a woman's coat folded beside it, and behind it all, a mountain. She flipped to the next page. It was her, sitting on that bench, the same mountain in the background, but the expression on her face, he had drawn it so clearly. It wasn't sadness, it was release. June closed the book, hands trembling. He had imagined her healed, even when she hadn't dared hope for it herself. That night she stood by the window long after everyone had gone. The rain tapped against the glass like a song she almost remembered, and just before the clock struck midnight, a thought broke through. Maybe Evan didn't come to Silver Hill by accident. Maybe neither of them had. It started with a headline. Not on the local paper, but in a folded copy of the Wall Street Ledger that Harper had brought back from her supply run to Missoula. She didn't even notice it at first. June was wiping the counter when Harper casually tossed the paper onto the table and said, "Look at these rich guys, leaving billions behind like they're shedding old skin." June only glanced, but then she saw the photo, and her blood ran cold. Evan Calloway, officially removed from Callaway Tech Board, voluntarily vanished last year after Mother's death. It was him. Same eyes, same smirk, same dimple in the left cheek. The man sitting in her cafe every day, only this time he wore a suit that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent. Harper noticed her frozen expression. "June? What is it?" She didn't answer right away. She just folded the paper shut and whispered, "Nothing. Just someone I thought I knew." That night she waited for Evan. She didn't know if she was going to ask, accuse, or just stay silent, but he didn't come. The next day, still no Evan, and the day after that, gone. It wasn't like him, not anymore. He'd been consistent, thoughtful, present, until now. June hated how quickly she noticed the absence, the empty seat, the way the light didn't hit the corner of the window the same way. Even the coffee pot seemed quieter. She held the sketchbook sometimes, just held it. She never told Harper, because how could she? On the fourth day, she heard the bell above the door chime softly. She looked up, heart thudding, but it wasn't Evan. It was a woman, mid-40s, blonde, designer coat, heels that didn't belong on Silver Hill's gravel roads. She walked in like she didn't belong, but she wasn't here by accident. June straightened. "Can I help you?" The woman hesitated. "I'm looking for someone." June didn't blink. "Aren't we all?" The woman sighed. "His name is Evan Calloway. He was spotted in this town a few weeks ago." The cafe felt colder. June kept her voice steady. "I think you've got the wrong place." But the woman wasn't convinced. "He's my brother," she said. June's lips parted slightly. The woman softened. "I'm not here to drag him back to boardrooms and headlines. I'm just trying to make sure he's okay." June studied her. There was something real in the woman's voice, not desperation, grief. Before she could respond, Harper stepped out from the kitchen with a towel in hand. The woman turned. They locked eyes. And Harper, being Harper, asked, "You said Evan Calloway?" The woman nodded. June closed her eyes briefly. The secret was out. They sat at a corner table. No one else was in the cafe. "I'm Olivia," the woman said. "I run the West Coast office now. After he disappeared, it all sort of fell apart. But that's not why I'm here." June finally spoke. "Why are you here?" Olivia's eyes misted over. "Because our mother would have wanted me to find him and tell him he didn't fail her." June swallowed hard. She thought of Evan's silence, the way he looked out the window like it hurt, the way he flinched when people asked about his past. "He blames himself," June said, almost too quietly. "I know," Olivia replied. "He always does." Before she left, Olivia placed a small envelope on the table. "If you see him," she said, "would you give him this?" June nodded, but her hands stayed in her lap. After Olivia drove off, Harper sat beside her. "You okay?" she asked. June looked at the window seat, empty again. "I'm not sure." That night, Silver Hill was quiet. Even the wind sounded like it had nothing left to say. June sat on the steps outside the cafe, envelope in hand, sketchbook on her lap. She didn't open either, but she whispered into the night, "Where did you go, Evan?" And somewhere, whether 2 towns over or 2 states away, he felt it. Because the next morning, just as the sun started to rise over the hills, Evan Calloway walked through the door of the Rusty Spoon Cafe, soaking wet, exhausted, and holding a single white daisy in his hand. He stood there in the doorway like a man who had walked through every kind of storm just to get back to something fragile, something he wasn't sure was still waiting. June didn't say a word, neither did he. For a moment, it was only the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the quiet drip of water falling from his hair to the floor. And then Evan stepped forward and placed the daisy on the counter. "I didn't know if you'd let me back in," he said, voice low. June looked down at the flower, then up at him. Her voice cracked. "You disappeared!" He nodded. "I saw the article. I knew you'd figure it out. And I panicked." "Why?" she asked, though she already knew. He answered anyway. "Because I've never been more honest in my life than I was in this town. With you. And when the truth caught up with me, I didn't know how to stay and still be the man you thought I was." She folded her arms, almost hugging herself. "You thought I cared about the money?" "No," he said gently. "I thought I did." He paused. "My whole life was built around that company. My mother was sick for years and I wasn't there. I thought throwing money at it would fix the guilt. When she died, I tried to leave it all behind, but it still followed me." He looked around the cafe, at the sketches still pinned behind the register, at the tiny, chipped corner of the wall he used to rest his elbow against. "At first this place was just somewhere to hide," he said. "But then you brought me coffee one morning without asking how I liked it, and it was perfect. You remembered." He stepped closer. "And then you saved a stray dog and cried behind the counter like no one was watching." He smiled, soft-sad. "You talk to the bread like it's alive. You call the espresso machine old gal. You're the first thing I think of when I wake up and the last thing I try not to dream about." June's eyes welled, but she didn't break. She asked one question. "Why didn't you tell me?" Evan swallowed. "Because I didn't want to lose the only version of myself I've ever liked." Silence fell, but it wasn't heavy. It was searching. That night they didn't close the cafe. They left the lights on, poured whiskey into chipped coffee mugs, and sat across from each other at the booth by the window. "I met your sister," June said softly. He flinched. "Olivia? She left you something." June handed him the envelope. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a photograph. A young Evan, maybe 10, holding his mother's hand on a pier somewhere, smiling like the world hadn't touched him yet, and a note in Olivia's handwriting. "She forgave you a long time ago. You just never forgave yourself." He didn't cry, but he looked like someone who might, if he let go for just a second. "I wish she'd seen me here," he whispered. June reached for his hand. "She did. I think that's why you stayed." Later, much later, when the moon had climbed above the hills and Silver Hill fell asleep, they walked to the back porch of the cafe. The air was cool, crickets sang, and Evan leaned in, slow, uncertain. But June met him halfway. Their kiss wasn't urgent. It wasn't the kind you write songs about. It was quieter, like an apology and a promise all at once. He pulled back first. "I'm not leaving again," he said. She searched his face. "You're not running anymore," she corrected. He smiled, and this time she smiled back. They didn't go to bed right away. They just sat together, legs touching, hands tangled, watching the night pass. Like maybe, for the first time in their lives, they didn't need to chase anything. Because maybe, just maybe, they were exactly where they were supposed to be. The morning light in Silver Hill came softly, not in streaks of gold or grand arrivals, but as a quiet turning of the sky, like someone pulling back the blanket on a sleeping town. June stood barefoot on the back porch of the cafe, holding a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. The breeze tugged gently at her robe. Behind her, she could hear the soft creak of the floor as Evan stepped out. He didn't speak right away, just wrapped his arms around her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. It felt natural. Like they had done this 100 times before? Like they had never needed to start over, only to remember. "Do you ever think," he murmured, "that maybe life breaks us down just enough so we finally fit where we belong?" June turned to him. "No," she whispered. "I think we were always meant to fit here. We just took the long way around." That morning, the cafe filled slowly. Locals drifted in. Mrs. Kendrick with her crossword, Mark with his thermos, old Walt asking if the cinnamon rolls were burnt today. June moved through the space like breath itself. Evan worked beside her, quiet and steady, not hiding, not running. And the regulars noticed. They didn't say anything outright, but they lingered a little longer, tipped a little more, like they were saying welcome back even if they never knew he had left. Days passed, and the world didn't stop spinning. Silverhill stayed small, predictable, but within that smallness, something changed. June began to paint again, not for the wall behind the counter, but for herself. Evan spent afternoons fixing things he used to ignore, the loose railing, the flickering light, the broken sign outside. He even laughed once when June burned the biscuits and tried to blame the oven. And one night, when the stars were bold and the world was quiet, he read her a letter he'd written to his mother but never mailed. She cried. He held her. There was no grand proposal, no headline, no cinematic ending, just the slow unfolding of something fragile and real. One morning, months later, June stood at the window looking out at the dusty road, and she said, "You know, I used to believe people only came through this town when they were lost." Evan walked up beside her, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He handed her one. "And now?" She took a sip before answering. "Now I think maybe some people come through here to be found,